Why is it acceptable for a lot of Americans to kick their kids out of home as soon as they turn 18? I'm 30 now, so it's been a while. But at least when I was a kid it was just a holdover from a time when it was more doable. I come from a blue collar family that never had a college graduate before my generation, so nobody ever had debt to worry about. We lived in the rural Midwest where decent to high paying jobs in manufacturing and construction were easy to come by. Housing in general was cheap. It was all in all just much easier to do when my parents were that age, and even easier for my grandparents, all of whom also got married at that age. The difference with me is that my little farming town absolutely frickin' boomed in population when I was growing up, and it coincided perfectly with the manufacturing jobs getting shipped out of town and the financial crash happening right as I graduated high school. I grew up expecting to leave when I was 18, but luckily my mom saw the writing on the wall and knew it wouldn't be possible by the time I was that age, so she let me stay as long as I was working. A lot of people in my area, specifically, formerly rural, now suburban Midwest, weren't so lucky and had way less flexible parents who basically told them to suck it up because it was easy for them, so logically it'll be easy for you too. So I can't speak for America as a whole, but while it's really not nearly as common as it used to be, when it happens in mostly white areas that used to be pretty small, it's because it used to be easy 30 years ago and some people simply aren't willing to recognize how different the world is and just shove their kids off to be an adult before they have any reasonable chance of being self-sufficient. My ex-boyfriend's take on this was that he would have paid for them to live at his house up to 16, get a job at 16 and pay rent, then kick them out as soon as they graduate. He said because at 18 they are an adult and all adults should take care of themselves. Now he had crippling back pain and wouldn't get out of bed for days, expecting others to wait on him. It's a back-asswards thing that people do. My parents had the healthy version of this. They said after I graduated that they'd be giving me no further money to support me, but that I always had a bed and meals for free at home when I needed it. At times I did need it, and overall it was a healthy transition into self-sufficiency. My grandmother kicked me out when I was 19. I was working at Taco Bell for $7.25 an hour. Gave me 3 months to save up and move out. Kinda impossible making that little. Plus I had to pay for school out of pocket. Slept outside for 2 days. Called crying asking to come back. She said, "Nah, it's time you learn how to be a man." And I never went back. Maybe cause I didn't talk to her a lot or interact socially, but I still think it was fricked up. Roadmap for failure in the future. I'm interested in your story. How you came up out of that. It also depends on what the kid is doing. My cousin's son dropped out of college at 19 to come home and play WoW in the basement 24/7. Refused to get a job, go back to school, volunteer. After a few months we did an intervention. Said he was free to play video games all day and night, just not at my cousin's house. Could go on social assistance, get an act with friends, whatever, just not stay where he was. Gave him a 3-month deadline, by which time he had started going to the gym and had found a college diploma course he liked and headed back to school. He graduated and is doing great now, has his own apt in another city and a nice girlfriend. Hope he kicked WoW to the curb. It seems like it kinda fricked him up for a bit. This only happens in families that already have other underlying issues. If you and your parents get along, there is a pretty high likelihood you are sticking around for a while. If you don't want to get a job, dropped out of high school, and don't help out around the house, then maybe they will look at giving you a kick in the pants. A recent study found that 52% of people age 18-29 still live with their parents. This is the highest since the Great Depression. High cost of rent and student loans are a main contributing factor. I have to think that the parents that do this truly never wanted kids to begin with, or didn't realize it until it was too late, and this is their easy out of having the burden of responsibility. Just my opinion. I have nothing to base this off of. They're buttholes. In our circumstance, we said to our 18-year-old son, "You can't have your girlfriend over to our house while we're at work and have loud sex with her while your little sister is home. Give your sister some money and send her to the park for an hour. Take her to her grandparents' house. Something. This is not okay. Junior, we told you not to do this. Your girlfriend's moaning and wailing is embarrassing and upsetting. Stop it. This is our house. These are our rules. No loud sex while your sister's home. Go to your girlfriend's house. Get a hotel room. Junior, if you do this one more time, we're going to kick you out. We're serious. This is not your house. You pay no rent. We decide what goes on in our house. And this loud moaning and sex talk cannot go on while your little sister's home. If you disrespect us and your sister again, you're out. Do you understand? He left us no choice. Well, she did. Really. All she had to do was be quiet. For Christ's sake. I lived at home until 27. Once I had a full-time job, my parents only asked that I help around the house and call them if I'm gonna be out late. Staying at home helped me save the money to purchase a house with my now wife. Pretty much the same for me. Lived with my parents for several years after college. Bought my house at 28. They did kind of push my older sister out a couple years after I left, but it was a situation where she could easily afford her own place and kind of needed to just learn to be an independent adult. My dad tried to do this to me. I had been working 30 hours a week during the school year, 50 during the summer, milking cows since I was 15. Buying food for the family, so I would have something to eat when I got home. I told him no, and I am pretty sure that my mom chewed his butt, as he stopped saying anything to me after that. After 3 semesters of community college, I transferred to a state school 150 miles away. I was super happy when my grandparents basically made up the excuse that we are moving and don't want the new house to be empty, so you should move in for the summers. Only spend one night in the house by myself. Thanks, Grandma. Now I do foster care and I tell her all our kids that they are welcome to stay until they are 30. Not sure who will take us up on the offer, as it's only been a few years, but the offer is very real. A bit of context you're missing is that in America, was expected that you move out when you're 18. This is a bit of an artifact from a couple decades ago, but the idea was, nobody wanted to stay at home after 18. You turned 18. You were done with school, you could get a job and your own place, have some freedom, live your life. Compare and contrast to some cultures where you're expected to live with your parents until you get married. That idea is stifling to many Americans. Now, all that is different than being kicked out at 18. But that's the context. Now take a family that has issues. Parents who are struggling or abusive in some way. They'll go, you're 18. This is America. Get out. On top of your last paragraph, there are also some families who feel like this culture of independence is a really good thing, and so it is their duty to enforce it. Maybe that's exactly what you're saying, but I think there's a difference between abusive parents using this culture as an excuse, and those who are honestly trying to be good parents. Crappy parents throw their kids out at 18, because that's the earliest they can legally do it. This isn't really seen as acceptable. There is a cultural expectation for adult children to move out and be fully independent as soon as they can, though. But that's not the day they turn 18. 100 years ago you could throw your 9-year-old out to end the street if you were tired of him. We're making progress. Just to balance the scales a bit, I know people here in utopian Denmark who got kicked out when they were 18. Social safety net being better than most places, it is less harsh, but still. And even here in America, this isn't really a popular thing to do, and in many cases is frowned upon. Don't get me wrong, it happens, but I would say it's much less of an American thing to do and more of an butthole parent thing to do instead. My kid is a preteen. He can stay with us as long as he wants, provided he is doing something productive with his life and working towards self-sufficiency. I only care about that really because it is good to have professional and personal goals, and I want him to be able to take care of himself after I die. I would never make him move out because he is a certain age. At some point, ask them to pay rent, then secretly put that rent into a bank account, and when they are ready to leave, hand them the cash. My dad started threatening to kick me out as soon as I hit puberty. His limit was my refusal to adopt his racism and involving myself romantically with people he only referred to in derogatory terms. I had a week to pack my crap and find a place because he had already bought a new house. I was immediately disowned and battled homelessness and unemployment for the next 2 years. It's been 3 years since we've spoken. He still has sentimental items of mine. And he never told me his new address, though it wasn't hard to find. I feel this only happens in families where the relationship is already damaged and the parents are usually raging narcissists, although I'm going off of anecdotal evidence. The parents are usually raging narcissists. I think this is a very good and accurate point. Maybe with white Americans, but it's not the case with Asian, Hispanic, and Arab Americans who let their kids stay at home until they're ready to move out. The kids usually end up looking after their parents when they get old too, instead of dumping them in a retirement home. Those cultures are just more family orientated compared to Western cultures, which are more about being independent. Here in Pakistan and most Asian countries, it is sort of a tradition that you live with your parents till marriage, until and unless you are studying in a university and live in the uni housing, or you have graduated from uni and have a nice paying job. Even then, parents don't kick out their children. Children usually move out when they think it is right for them. Also, for us it is absurd that parents don't support you. Actually, I don't know any single person that had to pay for their education out of pocket. Parents here 99.999999999999999999999999999% of the time pay for all education, including university, masters, and basically any education until and unless my parents make over $100,000 a year and don't pay for my tuition. Yet I can't qualify for any assistance to help pay for my college because I am under 24 and my parents make too much. Basically, in my state at least. Don't know if this applies to all the states. They assume your parents will support your schooling financially if they make more than a certain amount. I think it has something to do with the social aspect of having adult children living in your home. You are seen as a failure of a parent if your child can't hold their own by then. This same expectation led me to find my own housing so I didn't feel like a failure to meet society's expectations. When money and jobs were plenty, it was easy for kids just turned 18 to leave and start their own families. This was back when minimum wage was actually the minimum wage you could live off of. It's hard to say if it was just easier for them to leave, or if it was trendy socialized to be on your own. I believe that was around or before the baby boomers, so it was there just long enough to become the social norm or the expected. I read about other countries where you can stay with your parents until you're 30 plus or married. Sometimes even then the newly married couple just starts their own family inside the previous family's home. That's so wild. I stayed with my parents until I was 20, and even then I was filled with shame for not being able to provide for myself like I was expected to. Both of my kids are 25, and both of them have, over the last 7 years, moved out and come back twice. I've always told them that no matter what, my home is a soft landing space for them if they need it, and thankfully they've come back here rather than try to tough it out unnecessarily. But here's the thing. They both have tried to rush through getting their crap back together to move back out as soon as they can. And it's not me that's rushing them out the door, it's them. They have been fed this social construct that they should feel ashamed for living at home, that they should be off trying to make something of themselves, and if they're still living with their mom, they've got a tick in the failure box. My daughter and granddaughter live with me now, again, and I've done my best not to put pressure on her to stay, but gradually, over the past 6 months she's starting to let go of that bulls and beginning to make decisions based on what she needs, and not what society or other family members think. I love my kids, and I love my alone time, but I'm going to make good and goddamn sure that they don't have to struggle unnecessarily. I don't believe it builds character. I think it's a low-level trauma that I can help them to avoid. There's nothing wrong with a struggle that actually gets you somewhere, but spinning your wheels, jumping from fire to pan to fire to pan, that takes away time and energy from crap that will actually improve their lives. I have no idea, this has got to be a crazy thing. I have a friend from HK and he is confused by this as well. At 18, while you are an adult, you're not ready to play on an adult level yet. Why not stay at home, save your money, sure help with food and bills, but save your money, go to school, learn a trade, start a business, or buy some real estate to use as a business property. As a parent, why would you set your child up for failure by telling them they have to get out at 18? Let them stay and make sure that when they make that step and move out they have a strong foundation and a safety net that is in place. Some parents believe that letting your kids stay past 18 is coddling them and setting them up for failure in that way. They made it on their own at 18, so the kid should too. I don't agree, but that's the main mindset I've encountered. Come to Sweden, we are probably the most individualistic country on earth. We have kids who move out of their home as low as 15 without people bulging an eye. It's a bit harder now, because we are in a housing crisis, but it's still expected for kids to move out ASAP. My oldest kid turns 18 next month and I would never dream of making him move out. He is legit an awesome person, and I will be so sad when he decides to move, whenever that might be. I feel you. My oldest just moved out about 3 weeks ago and I'll tell you, it was such a mixed bag of emotions. Super proud and super sad at the same time. The move was his decision, cause he has a good job and wanted his own space, which I totally get, but I never ever would have made him move out. That's some straight up crazy crap bag parenting emo. As an American that was able to live with my grandparents till 23 then was allowed to move back in with my husband when I was pregnant. He just got out of the military, till we could find a place. I find it insane. Knowing I have them to lean on might make me less of an adult in some people's eyes, but it is a great feeling to have. It doesn't make you less of an adult. Some families have a lot of money and would just send a bunch. That's normal. Some families people love each other and want to help. That should be normal too. People aren't birds you kick out of a nest and they either fly or die splashed on the concrete pavement. I think it's less a cultural thing and more the idea that Reddit is predominantly used by young Americans and that people don't post about their parents being kind to them quite as often as the alternative. My mother kicked me out several times, starting when I was around 7. Eventually, I developed the habit of keeping an emergency suitcase packed. At 16, I had been saving up money from a job for a while and could tell that another blow up was coming. So I grabbed my emergency suitcase, got a plane ticket from Salt Lake City to Seattle and never went back. It was incredibly terrifying, and living homeless, at that age, came with a lot of traumatic bulls, but I think my mother just couldn't handle not getting her way. Any disagreement was perceived as disrespect and I wasn't ever going to be okay with that. So I went my own way. I'd never wish that situation on anyone and it should be illegal to put your kids through that. In the US you are viewed as a failure if you still live with your parents as an adult. Here they probably still live in their mom's basement as a huge insult. Some of them think that their kid will never succeed if there is no incentive to make it on your own. And according to them hardship builds character. I'm not defending it and there are plenty of other terrible reasons why a parent would kick out their child. But this is probably why it's not looked down upon. Agreed. My oldest son, 24, had to move back in with us recently when he and his GF broke up. Every week he was groaning on about he didn't want to be a failure who had to live with mommy and daddy. We didn't mind him being there and told him so, but he didn't like having rules either, no drinking or women. So he found the fastest way out he could, lol. It's baggage from the Great Depression and our parents and grandparents' resulting work ethic. Times were brutal back then and it was earn your keep or GTFO. I turned 18 in the 90s and mom was always very clear that 18 mean pay rent. To her or to a landlord. To some extent it was more realistic in the past. There was a time when a kid with no experience could get a good job laboring in a factory or in construction and work their way into a career that could buy a house, feed kids, and pay for college. That's not the reality anymore. Because there was a time in America where you could work 40 hours a week and own a home, have a family, and a car and provide for yourself. Parents tend to be under the impression that America is still that way when it's certainly not been for some time now. Historically it was because most of us didn't need to live at home. We were either away at college or had jobs that allowed us to support ourselves. Either way, it was usually our choice, not so much our parents kicking us out. However, things aren't as cheap for young adults anymore, so more are staying at home longer. If you hang out around abusive parents subreddits, it's going to seem like a common thing that happens a lot, and it happens more than it should, but in the grand scheme of things it's a small percentage. Most of the PPL I know that were kicked out at 18, 21 years old came from religious households. Although, there are situations where I don't blame the parents, like if their kid is addicted to dope and committing crimes despite numerous interventions. Well, I'm currently being threatened with getting kicked out. My father's child support is ending soon, so my mother says she can't afford our house without the payments, despite the fact her husband and her earn 80k. Therefore, they are getting a smaller house without room for me. So financial reasons could be a reason it's acceptable in the US, especially for single mothers. However, considering they're keeping my older brother who dropped out of college, it's likely personal reasons in my case. I'm Australian and was kicked out of home age 15, as was my brother. Pretty common in lower socioeconomic circles I grew up in, so it seemed normal at the time. My stepdad kicked me out of my mom's house less than a month after I turned 18 and gave me 6 hours to get out. I had to work that night and couldn't find anyone to cover me so I could pack my stuff. I hauled out as much as I could in the one trip I had time for, which wasn't much. I came back after work to get the rest of my stuff and my mom had moved my brother into my bedroom. She refused to give me any more of my stuff. She gave me a yellow folder full of information on therapists and a dirty blanket. That's it. I literally had nowhere to go and couch surfed for a while before finding someone to take me on as a roommate. I think American parents are just more heartless. Confirmation bias. Reddit is very America-centric. I think it's less an issue of American culture and more of crappy parents who think they are only parents for 18 years and then rid of all responsibility. I'd say greed in my case. My parents constantly talked about kicking me out of the house by 18 and then how I'd be responsible for taking care of them in their old age. As soon as I turned 18, my dad started charging me $700 a month to stay with him along with doing every household chore for him. American parents seem entitled and act like their children owe them eternal gratitude, respect and money, then act confused and hurt when they get cut out of their children's lives. It is parents who don't really parent, trying to go through the motions when it comes to raising children. In America, at 18, high school is over, and past that it is up to the family, child and parent, to move the child into secondary education or vocation, but it isn't mandatory. In a stable, well-structured household, the transition to college, or vocational training or an employment path, is done with the parents, guiding and helping the child. In a house where parenting has failed, the parents try to reach the same outcome by kicking the kid out because they believe it's the kid's fault they haven't moved into the adulthood of forward education or employment. In other words, they think this is what parents are supposed to do, is kick the kid out, because they are lazy or losers, like somehow they played no role in the maturation of their own child. In Italy, you literally stay with your parents until you can afford to move out and settle down with a partner. It's perfectly normal for someone in their late 20s and even 30s to live with their parents, and it works because there is a mutual respect there. I see so often in the UK as well as the States, kids growing up to hate their parents and parents hating their kids. Then the kid wants to move out at 18 or 21 and moans because they can't afford to buy some apartment. Why on earth should you be able to buy an apartment at that age? It's just crazy to me. I was dying to get out of my parents' house, but I was already paying for a full college load out of my earnings and there was just not enough left. Others may feel the same way, but have the resources to act. Our kids stayed until they were done with school and had jobs. Usually, when parents force their kids out, there is substance abuse, criminal behavior, psychological impairment, or a combination in the family. It's much more common on Reddit than in real life. It's much more common on Reddit than in real life. 100%. Because when this generation's parents were 18, the economy was going well enough that you easily could just move out at 18. College, plus dorm and all that, could be paid with a part-time job, and getting a degree almost guaranteed a well-paying job. Once women entered the workforce, the price of labor effectively halved. Not blaming women here, but now low-skilled workers and virtually worthless to employers, and a college degree has become another unhelpful hurdle. To start your kid off well these days requires at least 20 years, often longer. Combine that bad precedent with the fact that children are interacting less and less with their parents every year, and it gets worse. Any more parents don't tend to know how to form a relationship with their kids, mostly because they never see them. Everyone is working all the time. So why does that matter? At about 16-18, the relationship between a child and parent must change dramatically. The kid has to become an adult and take their life into their own hands, which means the parents have to let go of control, which is really hard to do when your relationship hasn't built up to be much more than one based on parental control and, hopefully, guidance. If there's no genuine human connection, the child's growth equates to the loss of your child. It may seem strange, but many people would rather lose their child than think they've lost their child. Seems something like that to me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.